Edie Lush, and I'm outside the Hub Pavilion in Davos, outside the ice house, in a little bit of an icy condition. Dame Ellen MacArthur, thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, thank you for having me.
So tell me, you have become very interested in plastics and the circular economy. First of all, tell me why.
Well, my previous life wasn't working in economics or plastics at all. It was sailing boats around the world. But when you take a boat around the world on your own, you manage all the resources you have on that boat. And at times you're 2,500 miles away from home. And I would go for 3 months non-stop. And when you're out there in the middle of nowhere, you really begin to understand what finite resources are. And it struck me when I set foot off the boat at the finish line of my last round the world in 2005 that actually our global economy is no different. Ultimately, we have finite resources available to us, and that's a massive challenge to our entire global economy moving forward if we're using our current linear take, make, dispose model of consumption.
And so you had some recommendations that you came out with last year in Davos. Tell me a little bit about what those are. Well,
last year we launched the New Plastics Economy Report, which looked at plastic packaging, specifically 78 million tonnes, and it looked at what happens to that plastic packaging. And we found the statistics to be really quite frightening. 32% leaks out to the environment, and 14%, just 14% is recovered for recycling, of which only 2% gets cycled into the same quality material. So in order to try and solve that, we announced here last year that we were going to try and do 5 things. Create a dialogue mechanism between everyone in the value chain, because the question here isn't can we clean the beaches. That is being done by many organisations, but it's actually how do we stop it getting there in the first place? That's the role we play. So you need everybody around the table, the manufacturers, the retailers, the chemical companies, the reprocessors, the cities, the regions, to understand how can we build a system that really can be restorative and regenerative. That was number 1. 2 was a global plastics packaging protocol. So what does a successful plastic system look like? Do we know what the plastics are? Can we valorise them? So designing what that looks like. And then we had the other 3, which were science-based research to continue to understand the flow of plastic packaging globally, to look at the innovations needed for some of the areas where we may need to innovate to a different material. And then the final one was to look at the regulation that may be needed to enact what we find out through the other 4 things.
And give me an update on what has moved the fastest.
What's been phenomenal is we now have 46 companies signed up to this programme. They've been with us for the last year, creating the statistics and the narrative moving forwards, which says that 50% of packaging should be designed so that it can be recyclable and valorised no matter what territory, providing you have a system to recover that material. 20% is a material which could be reused, so it's the kind of bigger B2B packaging for moving bottles and crates around. And then the final 30% is the small format sachet material, which at the moment really isn't economically viable to recycle at all and probably won't be for the foreseeable future. So we need innovation, almost innovation moonshots, to work out what that 30% will be in the future, and that's something that we have funding for and are working towards this year.
And tell me about your work with IDEO and design. How does that impact the circular economy in plastic?
Well, if you look at plastics, it's a system. It's a system whereby plastic's made, it does a job, but at the moment it falls off the end of that system. The majority, as we've found from our studies, shows that plastic doesn't go anywhere other than incineration or leaks, and a very small percentage gets recycled. But if you design from the outset for a system, then you end up with a very different outcome. And the idea of the work with IDEO is to create the circular design guide to help designers to think of circular principles as they design products and materials, especially around the plastic packaging and that 30% in this instance.
I was talking to Tim Brown from IDEO actually, and he was saying that it is quite difficult to redesign a system when it's already been designed. How hard have you had to push against people to make them come around to your point of view?
I don't think we've actually had to push that hard when it comes to plastic packaging, because everyone knows it's a problem. It's out there, and everybody knows it's a problem they can't fix on their own. And I think that's where it's really interesting here. The biggest manufacturer in the world can't fix this. You need everyone in the value chain to come together to agree on a solution that can change the system. And I think that is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And when everyone agrees the challenge is there and it needs to be addressed, then you have a lot more energy to try and solve that problem.
What's next?
What's next? We're looking at other material flows. We have a position paper here looking at food waste to try and solve that problem.
What's next?
What's next? We're looking at other material flows. We have a position paper here looking at food waste, particularly around cities, so reconnecting the food cycles to the food and farming systems. And we're also looking at fibres as well as another possibility moving forwards.
Ellen, thank you so much for stopping by the Hub Culture Pavilion here in Davos, and I'm Edie Lush.